Hello, everybody. Welcome to One Controller Report Podcast, episode 72. I'm Benjamin Yoder, and I am here very late on the weekend. I put off doing this podcast for a while. My goal this week. Did I say episode 72? Yeah. My goal this week was to beat Xenoblade Chronicles 2. Torna, the Golden Country. That name always throws me off. And I did not do that. I spent a good chunk of time. Like, I didn't spend that much time during the week itself, maybe like 6 hours across the whole week. But then I put probably another like 20 hours in over the weekend. And unfortunately was like probably right before the boss stood on there. And I just kind of burned out. So yeah. But yeah, it's an interesting piece of downloadable content so far. Basically, or just so far, I've pretty much played the entire thing, but I have not finished the story part of it. So yeah, it's as you'd expect, it is pretty much, a lot of the same like base mechanics and everything like that. But I was surprised by how much they did actually change. They actually changed how the whole blade system works. So now there's actually like two blades and like a driver. So basically, if you don't know, for Xenoblade, blades are like weapons, but they're people essentially. It's a silly thing. It's probably gonna go real bad trying to explain this. But yeah, they're basically weapons but people, and you typically in the main game would have the driver, who is like the person who is attached to these three weapons, and then they would just use the weapon of the blade, and the blade would just like stand in the background and like pop in for certain combos and stuff, or like certain special animations. But they really didn't do anything other than stand behind you with their hands at you, and there's like a little tether that goes that like basically shows your affinity with each other, and then eventually when it turns gold, you can do like some extra level 4 special kind of stuff. But they actually changed it, so now it's not only does the so you play as the driver, or you can switch between the blades too. You play as basically all. The best way to maybe explain this is that instead of having 3 separate blades with one character controlling each, you basically have 2 blades and a person, and then all those people switch out. So when the driver switches out, they don't just switch out the weapon, they switch out the entire person for the next person behind them. And so it's a bit different, although like in terms of the functionality wise, you're essentially still switching between like 3 different weapons. So that's sort of similar, but it adds like a new level of I guess you'd call like management, because not only are you switching between your driver role and your blade role, but then the blades also can switch between each other's, because you have 2 blades and you have cooldown timers for both of those, and you basically want to swap out these people as much as possible, because as you do that, it restores their attack cooldowns essentially, and also if you're switching between a blade and a driver, it basically completely restores their health. So they changed quite a bit, and then they also like made some parts of the battle system kind of more adaptable for the player, I guess. Maybe that's probably not the right word. So basically in the main game you could do elemental combos, but there's like a preset path for these elemental combos, so you had to do certain elemental combos. Now those preset paths are still in there, and they're still the ones you want to do because they deal the most damage, but you can essentially just kind of freeform combo any elements you want, and it lets you essentially just do a one level 3 combo, even if it's like a weaker version. And it's actually really a nice change in the game, because there would be times in the original Xenoblade where you basically would be trying to do a combo, and then you end up kind of stuck, and there's nothing you really can do. You couldn't, like, if you didn't have anything to finish that combo off with, or if like the AI wasn't presenting that option to you, you really couldn't do anything. You couldn't finish it off. You just had to wait for the combo to expire, basically, or the prompt for the combo to expire, which would take a while before it would start letting you start the next combo. So now you can go ahead and just basically cancel off the end of a combo once you've used the level 3 element, even if it doesn't actually make a set attack that boosts a lot of damage or anything like that. So yeah, a lot of very small changes, but overall I feel like if you liked Xenoblade Chronicles 2, like mechanically it's It's very similar. So if you did not like Xenoblade Chronicles 2 mechanically, I don't think this really does anything other than maybe speeds up the tutorial a little bit. But the weird thing, though, I mean, it speeds up the tutorial, but this DLC is very much focused on, I think, supplementing the main story rather than being its own story. So there's not really a lot of I guess there's not a lot of world building and stuff like that. It's very focused on this specific story that's happening, and maybe that'd be enjoyable on its own. I can't tell you because I already played through the main game and beat it before the expansion. I imagine most people have already played through Xenoblade Chronicles 2 if they're buying the Golden or Torna the Golden Country. So yeah, it feels like the tutorial feels a little wasted because it's pretty quick to get you up to speed. By the time you're on like the first like section of the first area, they pretty much have given you everything for the most part. There is some additional like they still take a while to introduce the ability to like break elemental spheres and stuff that took like 15 hours in the main game to introduce. You still don't really get, I'd say the full rollout is still probably about 5 hours, which is quite a while, but they give you so much more in the beginning, and with the ability to have, or with their ability to have like gnome blades in your party, there's not as much like kind of these issues where in the original Xenoblade 2, what would happen is when you're like starting to pull certain characters and stuff into your party, it's like a random pull from a pile of random blades essentially, and there'd be times where it's like you don't really feel well equipped because you didn't really get a good blade for this character, so that character feels kind of like weak and not able to combo properly with other people. And this one, all the blades are preset. And so there's a lot smoother progression of learning the mechanics. I feel like they're very, very conscious about what each character is capable of at each point, and then have them like kind of introduce more like the two main characters, Laura and Jin, like into a break and a break and topple combo, which is basically like a status effect where you break them, and then you use another status effect that topples them over essentially, and then the second character you get has a launch and then a smash. So they're very, very conscious of that stuff, where I think in Xenoblade 2 it was not so it was not specifically given to you to figure out or anything like that. They kind of were like, this is something you can do, but you're gonna have to kind of figure out how to put these pieces together to make it work. And I kind of like that a lot, that this game has a set set of skills for each character. It just makes it feel like the game can really make full use of combining these new characters with their blades, and then it also just makes it feel like like the field skill stuff. And maybe something you should do if this is making no sense is go watch like my Xenoblade Chronicles 2 review. But like the field skill stuff, basically in the original game you had all these field skills. There's like tons of them, and it was really hard to manage, and really hard to like to get the right skills to like get past certain sections of the game, or sections of mostly optional sections of the game, like optional quests and stuff like that. And this one, because you have a preset set of blades, for sure you have these skills, and so you can look up and see exactly how you need to level them up and stuff. So it's not really there's not nearly as many frustrations, I feel like, with running into to do a field skill and it's being like, this thing is asking me for something that I've never heard of before. Also, I need a level 5 version of it, and I may have like a blade in my inventory with the level 1 version of it, and it's just like and then you just like get stuck and you can't do anything. There are still moments of that where it's like, oh, I need level 3 command water, and then you're like trying to figure out what the heck you need to do to get that, and you just gotta figure it out at some point. But because the game is so short and compact, you pretty easily get that stuff by the end of the game, and it seems pretty smartly paced out in terms of the content. And like, oh, if you're gonna go, if they have this treasure chest in the original area, where you're like level 1 or something like that running around, it will be fit to the level of whenever you would actually have command water 2. It does a lot better job of that. So, and I guess that's one thing as well with like the areas. It's just like the areas are a lot more compact. which for a game like Xenoblade, which is, everyone's like, oh, it's big, open, whatever. I think it actually is a huge benefit in a lot of ways. Xenoblade Chronicles X, is a big open world game, and it has a hard time, creating defined areas at times, as any big open world game does. I think in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, the areas weren't too big, but they were kind of poorly designed. I don't really know. It was really hard to, and I didn't talk about this in the video review as much because I couldn't really put it into words, because they eventually did add some map features that made it a lot easier to navigate those areas. But there's a lot of times where you just kind of feel like you wrap around back onto yourself in the original Xenoblade Chronicles 2. And I don't know why it's that way. It's like you'll be doing something, and then you just kind of end up back where you started, and you're like, how did this happen? This wasn't where I was trying to go or what I was doing. And I feel like with Torna, the areas are a lot more smartly designed. There's a lot of branching paths that go through these little bulbs of areas. Essentially, they're not huge areas. They're kind of like their own little unique environment built around a handful of I would say distinct areas within that environment. And it feels like every piece of that environment is unique, and you can really tell where you are a lot easier, and all the paths seem to lead you to where you need to be going in the end, in terms of getting through that area. It's kind of a point A, point B kind of thing, where it's very yes, there's a bunch of different paths that all kind of lead to the same area, to where you're going. Where I feel like in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, when you go to an area, maybe it's just that they're used so much in so many different ways in Xenoblade Chronicles 2, you just kind of there was no real flow, because they didn't really have one place they're trying to direct you to all the time. And in this content, they do reuse the map for Gormott, which is the first foresty kind of continent. You can really just tell the design just feels completely different in a way that I think is kind of bad. But most areas in this expansion are actually all new. I think every single one is new except for the Gormott. So I think it's the beginning area, which is kind of connected to one of the last areas, but they're basically separate areas. I'd say there's probably about 5 to 7 unique maps, including one major town, one smaller kind of hamlet, and then a couple of smaller villages. At first, when you're playing through, you're like, are there going to be no towns ever? Because they're constantly trying to get to towns, which then are just blown up, and you're like, did they not have the money to make any towns? And so their excuse was just to blow up all the towns. But the final town is pretty intricate. It's got kind of I don't know the best way to put it. I guess it's like a Japanese design behind it. I don't think there's anything in the original game that kind of falls within that template. But yeah, I liked it a lot. I enjoyed the time I spent with it. It's probably about I'd say to beat it, I would probably say it's about 20 hours long, even though I haven't beaten it yet. But I would say content wise, realistically, the main story content, there's probably about 10 hours, which isn't bad. But there's a lot of required side quest content, and I feel like a lot of that side quest content is very fetch questy, which I think is, for the most part, I was okay with, but I know for some people that kind of quest design is kind of blech. So I'm trying to remember if it's distinctly different from the original game, but I don't remember if the side quests in the original game are also very fetch questy or not. So yeah, I just rambled a good long time about that. That was probably almost my complete thoughts on it. There's actually a lot of things that I think are kind of fascinating about this DLC piece, and it feels like they're really trying to feel out. They're really still trying to feel out how to make Xenoblade Chronicles 2 work, and in some ways they do, and some days they still don't. It's kind of funny to see them be like, "Yep, you're still trying," but then But yeah, the thing is though, is that I feel like unless they're doing some more content after this, it's kind of their last chance to kind of clean everything up. There was actually an interview with, I think I pulled it up here. I always forget his name. Tetsuya Takahashi, who's executive director at Monolith, and he basically, what people were asking, this is a, let me see, This is a US Gamer article, usgamer.net. I'll link the article. But they were basically asking him about the sci-fi nature of Xenoblade Chronicles X, and Xenoblade Chronicles 2 has some sci-fi stuff in it, but it is a lot more probably closer in line to the original Xenoblade, kind of like a fantastical medieval kind of thing. It's like a mix of sci-fi and more like I don't know, you call it traditional fantasy or something like that. Anyways, and he basically are asking like what direction he wants to go with next. He wants to keep going with one or the other, and he's like, I don't really want to do either. or basically he wants to do a completely different vision if he can, which makes me happy, because I think the thing that makes me very happy about Monolith is they never stick with one thing too long. So hopefully, I mean, I would hope that whatever they end up doing next, RPG-wise, is mechanically very different from what Xenoblade Chronicles 2 is, and hopefully whatever lessons they did learn with Xenoblade Chronicles 2, they can pull into the next game. But then I don't want to really be able to obviously pick those out, because if I can, that might mean the game's too similar to Xenoblade Chronicles 2. So it's interesting. I'm looking forward to see what they do next, and I really enjoyed the DLC. I bought the physical copy for like $40, and I don't really regret it. Although I played again like 20 hours over the weekend, and that kind of burned me out. 20 hours of one. So playing 20 hours of games is not a big deal outside of me just feeling like I should be doing other things like writing, which by the way I have not written or done anything within the last like 4 days, so I apologize. But yeah, playing one game, I'd say my tolerance for one game in general is probably about 20 to 30 hours. And then at that point, I need to be playing something else at some point. But I will try to shove through it this week, shove through the last area, maybe literally the last room before the last boss, and finish it up. I basically 100% of the story content of the game. I think there's a few more missing bits, and there's some like battle content that I don't really want to touch on. It's like, oh, the lowest level one was like a level like 70 boss who I did okay against, but I wasn't going to be willing to spend the time to not only fight them, but also grind up the money I would need to buy where they were located, essentially, from this little Nopon guy. He's a very tiny Nopon man. He's a very tiny man. So yeah, enjoyed it a lot. If you like Xenoblade Chronicles 2, fans of the Xenoblade Chronicles 2 will enjoy Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Torna. It reminds me a lot of like Final Fantasy 13 too, and how they fixed a lot of their problems that they had very early on in the game. And then also it reminds me of Final Fantasy 13 too, as in whenever I try to recommend it to anyone, I then have to recommend, well, you gotta play Final Fantasy 13 first. And don't get me wrong, I think Final Fantasy 13 is like a fine game for the most part, but most people aren't willing to listen to you if you're going to tell them play Final Fantasy 13. And so like Xenoblade Chronicles 2, I think is a lot more, does not have the negative PR of like a Final Fantasy 13, but trying to convince people to play a whole RPG that takes like a good 10-15 hours to get to the starting point is a challenging thing. Before we wrap up, let's make this podcast not entirely about Xenoblade Chronicles 2. I probably should have started with this, but hey, too late. If you're still here, like, congratulations, welcome. I love you. Xenoblade Chronicles. No, that is not the words. That is not the words that I want to say out of my mouth. There's the Castlevania Requiem. I think I may have mentioned this before because it showed up as like a trademark, but the Castlevania Requiem like bundle for Rondo of Blood and Symphony of the Night was announced, and there's nothing really to say about it per se. Those are two fairly well-known games. Symphony of the Night is well-known. Rondo of Blood is as well-known as it can probably get. I think there's probably a lot of Castlevania fans who have not played Rondo of Blood because they just stuck with like the Metroidvanias and stuff like that. But yeah, I'm thinking about maybe picking it up. There's kind of two things here. One, I've been wanting to play Castlevania Symphony of the Night again. But the problem being is I want to play it with the PSP voice acting because I've not listened to the PSP voice acting before, and I'm gonna guess this PS4 version is gonna have the old voice acting and not the PSP voice acting. So I may end up buying it and then not playing Symphony of the Night on it at all, and still playing the weirdo PSP version of that game. I still can't figure out how to get that game to like look right on a TV. It's such a weird resolution. I don't know. It's like weirdly like stretched. I don't know. I don't know. I think I'm doing something wrong. But I think the reason why I didn't definitely probably pick it up, although I don't know how much it costs. But I do want to pick up Rondo of Blood on PS4 because I'd rather not play Rondo of Blood on a PSP. I've played Dracula X Chronicles, which is where the collection is, and I never picked up Rondo of Blood on the Wii. So having a platform where it's easy to control PSP video out, using PSP control is something I put up with, not something I particularly enjoy. And then just like PSP doesn't always scale up to a TV particularly well either. So that's I'm interested in doing that eventually someday. I'll continue to say eventually someday with this stuff. It's sad. Like I have maybe a stack of like 5 to 6 games that I'm like, I need to play these soon? ? And there's no way I'm playing any of them soon. Valkyria Chronicles 4 is in that stack. Still got Sword Art Online Fatal Bullet in that stack. Still got Shaman King Master of Spirits 2. Mighty Number 9. I just started Ghost Squad. I might end up... So just as a heads up, I have no streaming plans for next week yet. I gotta figure that out. So I'll update on Twitter when I figure that out. But we may end up playing more Ghost Squad just because I want to finish Ghost Squad. I mean, like, I technically finished it, but I want to finish out the rest of the content. But then I also don't know if I can will myself to set aside another 2 hours to play through Ghost Squad. So maybe if I force myself to stream it, that will make me do it. Yeah, there's some more stuff over there. I can't remember everything's over there, but there's a big stack. Blade Strangers, all that stuff. I don't know. I'm just focusing on finishing Gold or the Torna DLC, and once I'm done with that, I'll probably move forward. Trying to 100% the story content put me around 25 hours in Torna, which is going to be much more reasonable than trying to do all the content in Xenoblade Chronicles 2. But yeah, we'll see. I mean, the Golden Country has all the DLC packaged into it. For the original game, so I'm kind of mixed on what I want to do with that. I don't know. I feel like I shouldn't play any more Xenoblade Chronicles 2. We'll see. But yeah, we'll see if I amount that into a review or whatever. I'm not really sure what the plan is for that right now. So I guess that's going to do it for this week. Thank you for listening to a very Xenoblade Chronicles 2 Torna, the Golden Country episode. I feel like I just kind of regurgitated everything from my stream, but that's okay. That's all right. That's life. Unfortunately, I don't think there's any article this week. I've got stuff still moving, but not moving at the pace I'd like them to. So I will give you any updates once I have a better idea of what I'm doing with that. First things first, though, is I got to figure out what I'm doing for streaming this week. And first things first is I got to get this podcast set up to go out. I'm doing this last minute for the weekend, so I need to make sure it's up and ready for Monday, so I can look at the number and say, yeah, you 2 people there are listening to it. Thanks, man. Thank you. I don't know if it's the same handful of people that listen to it or if it's new people. There's 30 views on my Ghost Squad stream. Why? Why are you watching this? I don't know. Anyways, I don't know. That's going to be it. I'm going to end it now. Thanks. Have a good week. Bye.